The wheel had come off 2 miles outside Netherby, and it was raining, and the man at the forge was in no hurry. That was the first thing Isolde Farrand noticed about him, and she noticed it with the particular impatience of a woman who has been standing in a doorway, watching rain for 40 minutes, and would like something, anything, to move faster than it is currently moving. He was a big man, broad through the shoulders in the way of men who work iron, and he was bent over her carriage wheel with the deliberate, unhurried attention of someone for whom haste is simply not a category of thought. "Is it going to take much longer?" she said. He did not look up. "It will take as long as it takes." That is not an answer. It is the only accurate one. He turned the wheel, examining the felloe where the iron tire had worked loose. The tire has come off the rim. The wood underneath has swelled and split. I can shrink a new tire onto it, or I can tell you it is fine and let you break down again in 4 miles. Which would you prefer? I would prefer to reach Netherby before nightfall. Then you will be disappointed in one of us, and it will not be me. She looked at him. He was, she decided, exactly the kind of person her aunt had warned her about when she had insisted on making this journey. Rural, slow, possessed of the maddening self-possession of people who do not understand that the world has places to be. He was also, she noted, extremely tired. She could see it in the way he moved, which was economical past the point of economy, the movements of a man conserving something. There were shadows under his eyes, and a stiffness in his shoulders, and a quality about him that she read, uncharitably, as the exhaustion of a man who has stayed too late at the alehouse and is paying for it at the forge. "You look as though you slept poorly," she said. It was not kind. She was aware it was not kind. She was cold and wet and behind schedule, and unkindness was the nearest available comfort. "I did not sleep at all," he said, "without heat. The alehouse, I suppose." He looked up at her then. His eyes were dark, and there was something in them that was not what she expected. Not the defensiveness of a man caught out, but something quieter and more amused, and, underneath the amusement, something that might have been sadness. "No," he said, "not the alehouse. A mare foaling. It went wrong twice, and right the 3rd time, at 4 this morning. The foal is alive, so is the mare. That is why I look as I look." She had the grace, which she did not always have, to feel the flush of it in her face. "Oh," she said, "you assumed the alehouse." "I did. I apologize." "You needn't. It is what people assume." He turned back to the wheel. A tired man in the country is a drunk man, in the reckoning of people passing through. I have stopped minding it. She stood in the doorway and watched him work, and felt, for the first time on this long and irritating journey, genuinely ashamed of herself. She was not, in the ordinary run of things, an unkind woman. She was a clever, quick, impatient woman who had been raised in a household where wit was currency and had learned to spend it freely, and the spending had become a habit, and the habit had, over time, worn a groove that she did not always notice she was running in until she was already at the bottom of it. She had just run into the groove with a tired man who had spent his night saving a foal. "What is your name?" she said. "Tom," he said. "You are the blacksmith of Netherby." "I work this forge, yes." She noticed he did not quite answer the question, but she was too occupied with her own embarrassment to attend to the distinction. "Tom," she said, "I was rude. I have been traveling for 2 days, and I am cold, and I was impatient, and none of that is your fault, and I took it out on you, and you had been up all night with a foal. I am sorry. He straightened. He looked at her with the dark, quiet eyes, and something in his face shifted. A reassessment. The look of a man who has categorized a thing and is now revising the category. That, he said, is a more complete apology than I usually receive. I try to be complete about things. Do you? He set the wheel against the wall. The tire will take an hour. I have to heat it and shrink it and let it cool. There is a fire inside and a bench. You are welcome to wait where it is dry, if you would rather not stand in the doorway insulting me. It was said without malice. It was said, in fact, with the first hint of humor she had seen from him, dry and slight, and offered like a small gift. I would rather wait inside, she said, and not insult you. Then come in. She came in. The forge was warm inside, warmer than anything she had felt in 2 days of travel, and it smelled of coal smoke and hot iron and the particular clean mineral smell of a working smithy. There was a bench along one wall and a fire in the great hearth, and the ordered chaos of a place where things are made, tools on the walls in their places, iron stock in bins, the accumulated evidence of skilled work performed over many years. She sat on the bench. He built up the fire and set the new tire to heat, and moved around the forge with the tired economy she had misjudged as something worse. And for a while, neither of them spoke, and the not speaking was more comfortable than she expected. The foal, she said, after a while. Is it a colt or a filly? A filly. Grey, like her mother. He worked the bellows. She will be a good one. You can tell early, sometimes. She stood within the hour and found her feet like she had been walking for weeks. There is a quality some of them have. She has it. You sound fond of her already. I delivered her at 4 a.m. with my own hands after 2 hours of thinking I would lose them both. Yes, I am fond of her. He glanced at Isolde. That is not usual, for a blacksmith to be delivering foals. But the estate's man was away, and the mare could not wait for him, and I know horses, so. You know horses and iron both. I know a great many things, he said. It is a long story, and not an interesting one. She looked at him. She was beginning to suspect it was a more interesting story than he was admitting, but she had already misjudged him once today, and she was disinclined to press. Where are you traveling to? He said. Netherby. My aunt lives there, Lady Compton. I am to spend the summer with her. She made a small face. It was not my idea. Whose idea was it? My father's. He believes a season in the country will improve my character. Does your character require improving? She looked at him sharply, but there was no malice in the question, only the same dry, tired curiosity. My father believes it does, she said. He believes I am too quick to judge, and too free with my opinions, and too impatient with people who do not move at my pace. She paused. He is, on the evidence of the last hour, not entirely wrong. Tom made a sound that might have been a laugh, brief and low. You are honest about yourself, he said. That is rarer than you would think. I am honest about most things. It is one of my few virtues. I am honest, and I am quick, and I am apparently unkind to tired blacksmiths. Once, he said, you were unkind once, and then you apologized completely, which balances it. I would not brood on it. She looked at the fire. The tire was heating, going from black to dull red at the edges. May I ask you something? She said. You may. You do not speak like a blacksmith. He turned the tire in the fire. How does a blacksmith speak? Not like you. You speak like someone who has been educated. The way you put sentences together. It is a small thing, but I notice small things. He was quiet for a moment. "I read," he said. "There is not much else to do in the evenings. In a village like this, I read what I can get. It changes how a man speaks, over years." It was not a lie exactly. She could tell it was not the whole truth either, but it was plausible, and she let it be plausible, because pressing a man in his own forge about the manner of his speech was rude, and she had used up her allowance of rudeness for the day. We'll take a very short break. If you don't want to miss new stories, please subscribe to the channel. The tire took the hour he had said it would take. She watched the whole of it, which she had not intended to do, because the process turned out to be interesting in a way she had not anticipated. He heated the iron tire until it glowed and expanded, and then he and the boy who worked the forge with him lifted it, glowing, with long tongs, and dropped it over the wooden wheel, and the wheel began to smoke and char where the hot iron touched it, and just before the wood could catch fire, they doused the whole thing with water, and the tire contracted as it cooled, shrinking down onto the wood, gripping it, binding the swelled and split fellow back into a single tight and functional wheel. "That is remarkable," she said, and meant it. "It is ordinary," he said, "but it works. The iron holds the wood together as it cools. It is a good principle. A thing under the right kind of pressure becomes stronger than it was. Is that a blacksmith's philosophy?" "It is an observation. I try not to have philosophies. They cause more trouble than they solve." He tested the wheel, spinning it, checking the true of it. "This will hold now. Better than it was before it broke, likely. The split has been drawn tight. How much do I owe you?" He named a price. It was fair, lower than she had expected, low enough that she suspected it did not fully account for his time. She paid it and added to it, and he looked at the extra and pushed it back across the bench toward her. "The price was the price," he said. "You were up all night with a foal, and you spent an hour on my wheel, and you were gracious to me after I was rude to you. Take the extra. The rudeness was already paid for by the apology, and the foal is not your debt. Take back your money. I do not like to be paid more than a thing is worth. It sits wrong." She looked at him. She looked at a tired man in a country forge, refusing extra money, because being overpaid sat wrong with him, and she thought that this was a kind of person she did not often encounter in the circles she moved in, where the general principle was to extract as much as could be extracted from any transaction. "You are an unusual man, Tom," she said. "I have been told." She took back the money. She did not want to, but he was immovable about it, and immovability in service of a principle was a thing she found she respected, even when it inconvenienced her. "There," he said. "Now we are even. You were rude and you apologized, and I fixed your wheel and you paid me the correct amount. We may part with clean accounts." "Are we parting?" "You are going to Netherby. I am staying here. That is generally how it works when a traveler's wheel is mended." She stood at the door of the forge. The rain had eased. The light was going grey toward evening, but there was time still to reach Netherby before dark, now that the wheel was sound. "Thank you," she said, "for the wheel, and for being kinder to me than I was to you." "You were not so bad," he said. "You assumed the alehouse, which everyone does, and then you apologized, which almost no one does. On balance, you come out ahead of the average traveler. That is a low bar." "It is, but you cleared it, and most do not." He almost smiled. "Safe journey, miss." Farrand. Isolde Farrand. "Safe journey, Miss Farrand." She got into the carriage. The wheel held, true and tight, all the way to Netherby, and she thought about the tired man in the forge for most of the journey. which was longer than she usually thought about people she had met once. Her aunt's house was large and comfortable and full of her aunt, who was a warm, voluble, entirely well-meaning woman with a talent for filling silence and a summer's worth of plans for Isolde's improvement. "You are here," her aunt said, embracing her at the door. "You are cold, and you are damp, and you had trouble with the carriage, your man tells me. A wheel came off. It was mended at a forge, 2 miles out. Netherby's forge, I think, or near it." "Ah, the Netherby forge." Her aunt drew back. "And did you see him?" "Him?" "The Duke. He works the forge sometimes, when the mood takes him. It is the strangest thing. Half the county thinks he is mad, and the other half thinks he is a saint, and I think he is simply a young man who does not know what to do with himself, and has found that working iron is more satisfying than being a duke." Isolde stood very still in the hall of her aunt's house. "The Duke," she said. "The Duke of Netherby, James Ashford. He inherited 3 years ago, very young, and he took it hard, I gather the responsibility of it, and he does the oddest things. He works the forge. He delivers foals. He walks the estate in a labourer's coat, and speaks to the tenants as though he were one of them, which they love him for, and the county finds shocking." Her aunt shook her head fondly. "He is a good landlord, and a strange man, and entirely unmarried, which is a scandal his mother despairs of." "He works the forge," Isolde repeated. "When the mood takes him, he learned the craft as a boy, they say, from the old smith, and he keeps it up. His mother thinks it undignified. I think," her aunt paused, "I think a man who would rather make something with his hands than sit in a drawing room being a duke is a man with more sense than most. Why do you ask? Did you meet him?" Isolde thought about a tired man with dark eyes who had refused extra money because being overpaid sat wrong with him, who had spent his night saving a foal and his morning mending her wheel, who had told her he read in the evenings because it changed how a man spoke over years, which was true, and had let her assume the rest. "I met a blacksmith," she said. "He said his name was Tom." Her aunt's eyebrows rose. "Tom is the Duke's middle name. Thomas, James Thomas Ashford. He uses Tom at the forge. It is his." She searched. "His disguise, I suppose, though it is the worst-kept secret in the county. Everyone here knows. Only travellers do not." "Only travellers," Isolde said faintly. "You mocked him, didn't you?" Her aunt was watching her face with the sharp attention of a woman who has raised daughters and read a great deal. "You have the look of someone who has said something they wish they could take back." "I assumed he had been at the alehouse," Isolde said. "Because he looked tired. I said so, to his face, and he had been up all night with a foal, and he told me so, plainly, and I apologized. And he—" She stopped. "He was kind about it. He was very kind about it. He said I came out ahead of the average traveller because I apologized, which almost no one does." "That sounds like him." "I mocked the Duke of Netherby," Isolde said, "for being a drunk, in his own forge, while he was mending my wheel for less than it was worth." "Yes," her aunt said, with the beginning of a smile. "You did. It is the most interesting thing that has happened in this county in a year. He will not have minded, if that helps. He does not stand much on his dignity. It is rather the point of the forge, I think. It is the one place where no one treats him as a duke, and I suspect he prefers it." Isolde sat down on the hall bench, which she did not usually do, being a woman who preferred to be moving. "He let me apologize," she said, "for being rude to a blacksmith. He could have told me at any moment who he was, and I would have." Softened, Her aunt said, "Yes, you would have softened and apologized differently, and it would have been the apology one gives a duke rather than the apology one gives a man, and he would rather have the second, I think. That is why he did not tell you." Isolde thought about James Thomas Ashford saying, in his own forge, "People speak differently to a trainer than to a duke," except he had said blacksmith, and she had not understood, and the whole shape of the conversation reassembled itself in her mind with the new information, and she saw that she had, without knowing it, given him the one thing he apparently valued, which was to be spoken to as a man. She had also mocked him. There was that. She went to the forge the next morning. She went on foot, which was 2 miles, in her second-best dress, because her best was still damp, and she arrived at the forge with her resolve slightly weakened by the walk, and the certainty that this was a foolish thing to be doing, but that not doing it would be worse. He was there. He was at the anvil, working something small and precise, and he looked up when her shadow fell across the door, and she saw him recognize her, and she saw something in his face that was wary and amused in equal measure. "Miss Farrand," he said. "Your Grace," she said. Something crossed his face. He set down the hammer. "Ah," he said. "My aunt is Lady Compton. She informed me last night that the Netherby forge is worked, on occasion, by the Duke of Netherby, who uses the name Tom, and who delivers foals and refuses to be overpaid, and lets rude travellers assume the worst about him without correcting them." She stood in the doorway. "I have come to apologize a second time, more completely, in light of the complete information." He looked at her for a moment. "You needn't," he said. "The first apology covered it. The first apology was to a blacksmith. This one is to a duke I mocked to his face for being a drunk. They are the same man," he said. "The apology serves both. They are not quite the same man. A woman may be rude to a blacksmith, and it is a small thing, a moment of temper, quickly mended. A woman who is rude to a duke has committed something closer to an offense. The stakes are different." "The stakes are the same," he said. "The rudeness was the same rudeness. You did not know the stakes were higher, and so you were exactly as rude as your temper made you, no more and no less. That is worth more to me than a careful politeness would have been." He picked up the small thing he had been working and turned it in the light. "Do you know why I use the name Tom? My aunt has a theory." "What is her theory?" "That the forge is the one place where no one treats you as a duke, and you prefer it." He nodded slowly. "That is a good theory. It is close." He set the small thing down. "The forge is the one place where people tell me the truth. A duke is lied to constantly, not maliciously. People simply arrange themselves around him, soften what they say, agree with what he says, defer to him in 100 small ways that add up, over time, to a kind of solitude. He is surrounded by people and entirely alone, because no one will simply be a person with him. They are all being something to the Duke." He looked at her. "You called me a drunk," he said, "in my own forge, because I looked tired, and you were impatient. No one has spoken to me with that little calculation in 3 years. It was," he searched for the word, in the deliberate way she had noticed before, and now understood better. It was a relief. It was a genuine relief to be treated as an ordinary tired man who might have been at the alehouse. "Do you understand?" She thought about it. She was a clever woman, and she tried to understand it fully, which was the only honest way to understand anything. "You are saying I gave you something by being rude to you," she said. "You gave me the experience of being a person, and then you apologized completely, which meant you also gave me the experience of being a person who is treated fairly when he explains himself. Both of those are rare in my life. You did them both in 1 hour without knowing who I was, which means they were real. Isolde stood in the doorway of the forge and looked at the Duke of Netherby, who had wanted, more than anything the world could easily give him, to be spoken to plainly, and had found it in a rude traveller with a broken wheel. "That is the strangest thing anyone has ever thanked me for," she said. "It is the strangest thing I have ever been grateful for, but I am grateful for it." He came around the anvil. "Your wheel held? You reached Netherby?" "The wheel held. It was better than before it broke, exactly as you said. A thing under the right kind of pressure becomes stronger than it was." "You remembered that?" "I remembered all of it. I thought about you for most of the journey, which is longer than I usually think about people I have met once." She said it plainly, because plainness appeared to be the currency he valued, and she was a quick study. "I thought you were an unusual man. I did not know how unusual. I am less unusual than the county thinks. I am only a man who would rather make things with his hands than be deferred to in a drawing room. That is not madness. It is preference." My aunt said the same, that a man who would rather make something than sit being a duke has more sense than most. Your aunt is a sensible woman. She is. She also thinks you are entirely unmarried and that it is a scandal your mother despairs of. He looked at her. The dark eyes had the amused, tired quality she remembered, but there was something underneath it now that was more awake. "Miss Farrand," he said, "are you relaying your aunt's gossip or making an inquiry?" "I am relaying my aunt's gossip," she said, "but I am not opposed to it becoming an inquiry, if the inquiry would be welcome." He was quiet for a moment. The forge was warm, and the fire ticked, and the small, precise thing he had been working sat on the anvil, catching the light. "What is that?" she said, nodding at it. "The thing you were making." He picked it up and held it out to her. It was a small iron flower, delicate, the petals thin and true, made with a skill that seemed impossible in the medium. "A rose," he said. "I make them sometimes, when I cannot sleep. After the foal, this morning, I could not sleep, so I made a rose." She took it. It was cool and precise and beautiful in the specific way of a thing made well by a person who did not have to make it and chose to anyway. "It is remarkable," she said. "It is ordinary, but it works." He looked at her holding it. "Keep it, if you like. I have a box of them. My mother thinks it is undignified for a duke to make iron flowers. I find it is the most honest thing I do." She looked at the iron rose in her hand. "Your Grace," she said. "Tom," he said. "I would prefer Tom. Everyone here calls me Tom. It is the one thing I have made for myself, and I would rather keep it. Tom." She looked up from the rose. "I am going to be in Netherby all summer. My aunt has plans for the improvement of my character, most of which I intend to resist. But some of the summer will be my own, and I find that I would like to spend some of it here, if a rude traveller who once mocked you is welcome at the forge." He looked at her, and there it was, the smile, the real one, the not performing one, the smile of a man who has found something he did not expect and is grateful for it. "A rude traveller who apologizes completely," he said, "and who was, on balance, ahead of the average, is welcome at the forge any time she cares to walk 2 miles. It is a long walk. It is. But you cleared the bar, and most do not, and I find I would rather have the company of someone who cleared the bar than the company of someone who never had to." He paused. Come back tomorrow. There is a filly you should meet. Grey, like her mother. She has a quality. I think you would see it. You want my opinion on a filly. I want your opinion on the filly, and I want the company, and I want to be spoken to as a man for another hour or two, which you appear to do without effort." He looked at her steadily. "Those are 3 separate reasons, and all of them are true. Tomorrow," she said, "for the filly and the company and the being spoken to as a man. Yes." She walked the 2 miles back to her aunt's house with the iron rose in her hand, and she thought about a tired man who made flowers when he could not sleep, and a duke who had wanted, above all the things a duke could want, simply to be seen as a person, and a rude traveller who had given him that by accident and now intended to give it on purpose. She came back the next day. She met the filly, who was grey like her mother, and who had, exactly as he had said, a quality, a confidence, and a curiosity that marked her out, even at a day old. She gave her opinion, which was direct and detailed, and he gave his, and the giving of opinions turned into a conversation, and the conversation turned into a summer. The county talked. The county was going to talk regardless, because a duke who worked a forge and made iron flowers was always going to be talked about, and a duke who was spending his summer in the company of Lady Compton's clever, sharp-tongued niece was going to be talked about more. Isolde did not much care what the county said. She had spent her life being talked about for her wit, which was a kind of talk she had learned to weather, and the talk about her and the duke was, on the whole, more accurate than the talk about her wit had ever been, because the talk about her and the duke was that they suited each other, which was true. They suited each other. She was quick and he was still, and her quickness did not overwhelm his stillness, but rested against it, and his stillness did not slow her quickness, but gave it somewhere to land. She told him the truth, which was what he had wanted from the first hour, and he told her the truth, which was what she had never known she wanted until she had it. She stopped running in the old groove of unkindness, not because she was told to, but because the unkindness had never really been the point. It had been a habit, worn by a woman who was clever and impatient, and had not found anyone who could keep pace with her without needing to be impressed. He kept pace. He did not need to be impressed. He needed to be seen, which she could do, and she needed to be met, which he could do, and between them, the 2 needs made a thing that was stronger than either had been alone, a thing under the right kind of pressure, drawn tight, better than it was before. Her father, who had sent her to the country to improve her character, received a letter at the end of the summer that informed him she was engaged to the Duke of Netherby, whom she had first met at a forge, whom she had first addressed by mocking him for being a drunk, and who had, on the strength of her subsequent apology and her sustained honesty, decided she was the only person in 3 years who had spoken to him as a man. Her father read the letter twice and observed to his wife that the country had improved their daughter's character in ways he had not anticipated and could not entirely take credit for. They were married in the autumn, at the church in Netherby, and the county came, and Isolde wore a dress the colour of the grey filly, deep and clear, and she carried, instead of flowers, a single iron rose, made by the groom the night before the wedding, when he could not sleep, which was the most honest thing he did, and which was now, she thought, the most honest thing she owned. She kept the box of iron roses in the drawing-room, where his mother thought it was undignified, and Isolde thought it was the truest thing in the house. When people asked about them, she told them the truth, which was that the Duke of Netherby made iron flowers when he could not sleep, and that the making was the most honest thing he did, and that she had fallen in love with the man who made them before she ever knew he was a duke, when she thought he was only a tired blacksmith she had been rude to in the rain. It had turned out to be the best mistake she ever made, because it was the mistake that let her meet the man instead of the title, and the man was the thing worth meeting, and the title was only the coat he wore over it, the coat he took off at the forge, where he made roses out of iron, and asked, of anyone who came through the door, nothing more than to be spoken to, as though he were simply himself. She spoke to him that way for the rest of their lives. It was, he told her once, years later, watching her cross the paddock toward the grey mare who had once foaled at 4 in the morning, the only wedding gift he had ever truly wanted, and she had given it to him before she knew who he was, which was how he had known it was real. Thank you for listening to the story all the way to the end. Please tell us which city you're watching from, and what the story made you feel. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss new stories.